All right, good morning, everyone. Good morning. We're going to get started. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Marcel Pratt. I am the managing partner of Ballard Spahr's Philadelphia office, and it's good to see you all and so many familiar faces. I'm also bringing regards on behalf of our firm chair, Pete Michaud, who was supposed to be here and really wanted to be here, but is in Minneapolis for a very important personal matter. But Pete sends his regards. Speaking of firm leaders, also wanted to give a shout out to Liz Weissert, who's in here somewhere, but there she is in the back. But Liz is not only a phenomenal associate, but she's a really tremendous leader in our bar community and has served various important roles. And I know you'll hear from Liz a little bit later. But just wanted to come here to say welcome to you all, and that the firm is very proud to be hosting this event, although we wish we were hosting it for a different reason or under better circumstances. We know that the LGBTQ community is facing some renewed attacks, both hateful rhetoric, policies at the federal level, just things that really shouldn't be happening. We all know that equality is non-negotiable and everyone should have it. And so we're proud to be hosting this event, and we know that, in these times, compassion and community are more important now than they've ever been before. And so glad that we are gathered here today in community to have some really important conversations and to hear from some tremendous leaders. We have Landau here, who has been an advocate for equality for decades, for as long as I've known Rue, and is a champion who not only talks about it, but she actually walks the walk and lives out what she says through action. And so thank you, Rue, for being here, and thank you to all of you for being here as well. We also have our Chancellor, Kathy Jaffari, who's going to come up and say a few words, but just want to say thank you to Kathy for being a leader during these times for our bar. I mean, it is really reassuring to see that our Bar Association has stepped up and is organizing folks and not being silent in the face of a lot of oppression. And I know, Kathy, when we spoke, a year ago about what your tenure would be like, I mean, we had no idea this would be happening, but you and the Bar Association have really stepped up, and we're very proud of you. So thank you. So Kathy, come on up.
Okay, thank you so much, Marcel. And thank you to everyone for being here this morning. We are grateful that you have joined us both in person and virtually. And again, the impressive turnout that we have for our Meeting the Moment programs is touching my heart. I know it's touching the heart of all of the staff and all of the members. So it's really important that you're here today for this important conversation. I want to extend my sincere appreciation to Ballard Spahr, Pete Michaud, chair of the firm, Marcel Pratt, Philadelphia office managing partner, and Virginia Asando, chief diversity, equity, and inclusion officer, for their support and their warm welcome. As a former Ballard lawyer, I love saying that loud and proud. This warmth is something I felt from all three of you and from the entire firm for many years. And so I always feel like I'm coming home. And what an incredible place to be to have this conversation. Since 1802, I love saying that date, more than 220 years, the Philadelphia Bar Association has upheld the values of protecting the rule of law and defending our democracy. And we will not stop nor be stopped. As we move through 2025, we are finding the power of our voice to stay true to our mission, to serve the profession and the public by promoting justice, professional excellence, and respect for the rule of law. We are doing this by trying to create opportunities, these opportunities like this morning, for the lawyers and the legal profession to work together to meet this moment in service to our democracy. We have over 200 people in person or virtually here for this conversation. And it is critical when our justice system is being challenged and lawyers are being attacked and our communities are being attacked, that we all join together to protect the rule of law and access to justice for all. In doing so, we support the mission of the Philadelphia Bar Association and the value of lawyers and the legal profession by fostering the understanding of, involvement in, and equal, unabridged access to our justice system. As Chancellor of the Philadelphia Bar Association, I am proud to say that we have come up with 3 ways that you can lean on our association at this time. First, to be the convener. This city is full of legal professionals from across the city, including different practice areas, firm sizes, experience levels. And we value the contributions and viewpoints that everyone brings to the table. So please come to the table and join us. We are the communicator. Our voices are heard through resolutions, statements, and even amicus briefs. We have spoken out on numerous occasions this year in defense of the rule of law and independence of our legal profession, including signing on to 4 amicus briefs in protection of the legal independence of lawyers. We have also created a page on our association's website that aggregates know the law documents. You will find incredible resources on that page in support of the LGBTQ plus community on that site. And finally, the collaborator. We will collaborate with different partners in disseminating useful information, promoting opportunities to engage and volunteer that you'll hear about today, and donate financially to the organizations that need you. So with that, I welcome you to the 3rd in our series of Meeting the Moment in 2025. This one focused on LGBTQ plus rights. We have 2 great panels for you. One on what is happening right now with respect to those rights being attacked, as Marcel touched on. And the second, how the community can get engaged and help. But before we hear from our panelists, I am so grateful for our keynote speaker, Landau. City of Philadelphia Councilmember, we are so lucky to have you here today to speak to us on this topic. I'd like to make sure that I thank the organizers, Crystal Kane, Maureen Holland, Debbie Gross, Vic Patel, Virginia Sando, Harvey Hurdle, Rachel Kipp, and Ali Hooven, with the support of our chairs of the Delivery of Legal Services Committee and the Task Force on Civil Gideon. I also want to extend a quick, sincere thank you to 2 people who have been supportive of our journey and our programming, and they were key in our last program, a focus on the federal funding freeze. You can watch each of our programs on our website. So thank you to Peter Gonzalez and Jessica Hiltburn Holmes, Executive Director of the Philadelphia Bar Foundation. I'd also like to thank all of our speakers whom you'll meet shortly. But before we get there, let's welcome Rue Landau to the stage. Rue Landau is a civil rights and housing attorney, a public school parent. I love that. I'm a proud product of the Philadelphia public school system. And the first openly gay, openly LGBTQ plus member of the Philadelphia City Council. She has spent her entire career fighting for social justice and equity for Philadelphia's most vulnerable communities. She has a vision for Philadelphia that lifts up every neighborhood and ensures that every person has the opportunity to thrive. She started her career as an activist and housing organizer. She was on the front lines in the fight for economic justice, demanding access to affordable housing and healthcare during the early years of the HIV/AIDS epidemic as an active member of ACT UP, Kensington Welfare Rights Union, and the Women's Health Action Mobilization, WHAM. Then, for more than a decade, Councilmember Landau worked as an attorney at Community Legal Services, helping low-income renters in Philadelphia avoid illegal evictions from their affordable housing. Councilmember Landau then served as the director of both the Philadelphia Commission of Human Relations and the Fair Housing Commission, the civil rights and housing enforcement agencies. During her 12-year tenure, Councilmember Landau transformed the agencies into national models for government and community engagement, social justice, and equitable opportunity. Working with City Council, she led initiatives to strengthen and expand the city's fair practices ordinance and fair housing ordinance. I can go on and on about all of the incredible things that Councilmember Landau has done. But what I want to really highlight is after leaving the commission in 2020, she taught housing at Temple University's Beasley School of Law, and she served as the director of law and policy at the Philadelphia Bar Association. We were lucky to have you, Councilmember Landau. Now, after winning the November 2023 general election, she is using her knowledge, her skills, and relationships to serve all Philadelphians, for which I am grateful as a Center City resident. I'm also grateful for her friendship. Please join me in welcoming Councilmember Landau.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Kathy. I am a fan of yours as well. I am so proud of you. And thank you also to Ballard and to Marcel. I had the pleasure of working with Marcel when he served as city solicitor. And we'll always tell everybody the most impressive oral argument I ever heard was Marcel defending our wage equity law at the Third Circuit. And it was a winner. And we are so lucky that, that we had you. Good morning, everybody. It's beautiful to see so many of you out here. Thank you to the Philadelphia Bar Association, to Chancellor Kathy Jaffari, and to our hosts here at Ballard's Bar for organizing this incredibly important conversation and for inviting me to join you here today. I too am so impressed with how the Bar Association has stepped up to make sure that our voices are heard and that we are collectively coming together to find solutions to the issues that are facing us today. It's truly an honor to be here as a lawyer and as Philadelphia's first openly LGBTQ member of City Council, especially at a time when leadership, partnership, and action are more critical than ever. We are at a crossroads for LGBTQ plus rights in this country. Across the nation, we're seeing the rights of LGBTQ plus people, especially trans and non-binary individuals, being stripped away through executive orders, hostile legislation, funding cuts, and an emboldened network of coordinated attacks. Healthcare access, anti-discrimination protections, even the basic right to live openly and safely are all on the line. The rollback of federal protections we are witnessing under the current federal administration isn't just political theater. It's already having real devastating consequences for young people, for families, and for all of us who believe that dignity and equality are not negotiable. We're seeing executive orders that stifle and try to erase the community and set dangerous precedents for how our most vulnerable are treated. For example, federal agencies are swiftly removing references to identity pronouns and restricting the ability for transgender people to file discrimination charges, which sends a chilling message across our nation. In fact, these actions have even led to a reduction in gender-affirming healthcare for trans youth and forced transgender women into men's prisons. These kinds of moves threaten lives and erode our hard-won progress. And of course, we cannot ignore the devastating cuts to federal funding, especially to institutions like Penn and Harvard and Columbia, who have faced major setbacks in critical research, opportunities for LGBTQ plus people, and students and academic funding. Unfortunately, we're also seeing these attacks on civil liberties test the limits of the Supreme Court and lower courts across the country. In the interim, leaving the rights of LGBTQ plus people, immigrants, and those who have benefited from important DEI practices, wondering if their rights will be protected. We know from history that when attacks happen at the federal level, it falls on states and local leaders, to lawyers and advocates, to all of us to fill that breach. That's why today's theme, Meeting the Moment, is so powerful and so necessary. It's a reminder that defending democracy isn't just about elections. It's about this daily, sometimes quiet, sometimes loud acts of resistance, advocacy, and solidarity that safeguard the rule of law and protect the most vulnerable among us. Before joining City Council, I spent years leading the Philadelphia Commission on Human Relations, our city's civil rights agency. During that time, I saw firsthand how essential it is to have strong local legal protections, especially when federal leadership is failing. Like now, when our federal EEOC is focused on investigating law firms for their DEI practices, instead of rooting out racism, sexism, xenophobia, transphobia, and all of the other ills in our workplaces. We know this, and we've known for a long time how important it is to have local laws in Philadelphia and to stay strong. In fact, Philadelphia has been protecting people from discrimination in employment, housing, and places of public accommodation based on people's sexual orientation since 1982 and gender identity since 2002. And while Philly's been at the forefront nationally of our cutting edge civil rights laws, when I was at the commission, we worked to strengthen them and to update our fair practices ordinance, to strengthen protections for LGBTQ plus Philadelphians, immigrants, people with disabilities, and many, many, many other groups, because we understood that civil rights are not static. They must be defended and expanded to stay current with the times. So we added laws that mandate gender neutrality in bathrooms and on city forums, and supports for trans and non-binary students in school and then at their after-school activities. That experience shaped my belief that government at every level has a duty not just to respond to injustice, but to actively build a more inclusive and equitable society. In City Council, we're working to keep our local protections strong, to protect access to gender-affirming healthcare, life-saving HIV medication, to protect LGBTQ plus youth, and ensure that Philadelphia continues to lead as a city of inclusion, no matter what is happening in Washington. My office has recently begun hosting convenings with LGBTQ plus community leaders, advocates, healthcare providers, and nonprofit leaders to make sure that everyone is sharing information, working together, developing alternate plans B, C, and D, to deliver medical care and resources, and rowing in the same direction when it comes to organizing our rights. But government can't do this alone. The legal community, all of you here, and I've got to say, I have never seen so many lawyers and supporters out in a Mourning for a Bar Association event in a long time, especially those who are streaming as well. Really impressive and shows the urgency of the situation that we're in. You all play an absolutely critical role. We attorneys are often both the first line of defense and the last bastion of hope when someone's rights are threatened. We are the interpreters and defenders of the law when it is weaponized against marginalized communities. And you are uniquely positioned to help shape the next chapter, not just through litigation, but through public education, activity, advocacy, and collective action. Meeting the moment means asking, how are we using our power to protect others? How are we standing up even when it's difficult to defend rights that some of us are trying to erase? And how are we building coalitions across professions, across communities to ensure that when one of us is under attack, all of us rise to respond? These are some of the questions I hope we pose to each other today and answer with your wonderful panels, and continue when we leave this panel and return to the work that we are doing every day. Before closing, I'd like to address something I've heard from many advocates and some members of the legal community. In the wake of the nation's federal government essentially ignoring the law and even attempting to trample it, some of us are having a crisis of faith. And when it comes to the rule of law, I can understand the sentiment with so much on the line, but I want to say that we must stay strong and push our work forward. I'm hopeful because I see the extraordinary leadership gathered in this room and on today's panels. I know the strength, commitment, and brilliance that exists within the Philadelphia legal community. And I know that when this community leans together, we can make sure that civil liberties and rights don't slip away. I know this work is so very, very hard. And I know it also takes a personal toll on us when we are the objects of the attacks, when we are members of the community, when we feel like everything that is happening in Washington is coming after each one of us individually or collectively in our communities. I also know that in the Venn diagrams, there's overlap of LGBTQ plus immigrant, person of color, that this is coming at people so much. And I want you all to absolutely take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and do what you can to gather the strength that we can't be silent and we can't not act. We must make sure that we're leaning on each other for collective action at this time, because as fast and furious as this 100 days are, we must rise to the occasion and be resilient, as I know that we are, and fight back in every possible way that we can. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for standing with the LGBTQ plus community. Thank you for meeting the moment with courage and action. I look forward to the conversation ahead. I'm here for you if anybody needs me, room 592 in City Hall. There's a variety of other ways to get to me, but thank you all so much.
Councilmember Landau, Rue, if I may. As always, touched, moved, and inspired when I hear you speak, especially as you shared at the end of your comments. And civil rights must be protected, right? Not negotiable. And what I love is keep our protections in Philadelphia as a city of inclusion. So when you say collective voice, Thursday, noon, law day, lawyers come and take your oath. And now I am really pleased and honored to welcome Maureen Holland to the stage with her panelists, and the show will continue. Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Landau. Thank you, Kathy. Before we get started with our panel, and come on up, panelists, I just want to share that many of you are eager to start the conversation about how we can help. And so to that end, we actually have a direct representation interest form, and there are forms alongside the sideboard here. So if you have an interest in getting involved, the specific areas of expertise that we've been asked to gather from folks are people with experience in child welfare, criminal law, healthcare, immigration, name changes, and second parent adoption. But certainly if you have expertise to share in this community, we welcome that. And I'm going to now take my seat. All right. It is my pleasure to introduce this amazing panel, and I want to say thank you to each of you for agreeing to be part of it. My name is Maureen Holland. I am an attorney and member at Cozen O'Connor in Philadelphia, and I practice as part of the Institutional Response Group, which focuses on the intersection of civil rights and the education space. I'm here today, not in order, but I'll put them in order. I'm here with Ronda Goldfein, who's the executive director of the AIDS Law Project of Pennsylvania, one of the nation's only independent public interest law firms dedicated to serving people with HIV and AIDS. Ronda has guided the AIDS Law Project for over 2 decades, leading critical advocacy efforts and providing free legal assistance to those affected by HIV and AIDS who face discrimination or need help with issues ranging from housing to healthcare. Her expertise on the intersection of public health law and civil rights has been recognized nationally. Ronda's perspective on how legal advocacy can address health disparities with marginalized communities is particularly valuable to our discussion today. Next, we have Jasper Leem. And Jasper is currently the executive director of the Attic Youth Center. The Attic is Philadelphia's only independent LGBTQ+ youth center that creates opportunities, promotes acceptance, and builds community for LGBTQ+ youth since 1993. Under Jasper's leadership, the Attic continues to provide essential services, including counseling, case management, education support, and social programming for LGBTQ youth ages 14 to 23. Jasper brings valuable insight on the current challenges facing youth in our city and the legal issues that impact their lives. And then our final panelist is Eli Siegel, a partner at Stapleton Siegel Cochran. Eli's practice focuses on complex commercial litigation and First Amendment. He's been a steadfast advocate for LGBTQ+ rights throughout his career, and he's represented LGBTQ+ clients in groundbreaking cases involving discrimination, family law, and civil rights. He has also provided pro bono legal service to numerous LGBTQ+ organizations in Philadelphia, and he has a deep understanding of how constitutional protections apply to LGBTQ+ individuals, and that makes him an invaluable voice in our conversation today about the current legal landscape. So to get us started, I'd like to ask my panelists in a single word or phrase, how would you characterize the current legal landscape for LGBTQ+ individuals? And we'll start with you, Eli.
Single phrase?
Single word or phrase.
Yeah. So I think it's frightening but hopeful.
Jasper.
Violent but fierce.
Ronda.
Painful.
Jasper, to set the stage for our discussion today, can you just give us some level setting? What are we talking about when we use the term gender identity, and how is that distinct from other concepts like sex?
Sure. So my name is Jasper Leem. I go by they and he pronouns interchangeably. I am a person of trans experience, and I grew up just outside of Philadelphia. So I talk about, I've been doing work with LGBTQ youth since I was one. I'm just older now. And, a lot of times when we talk about gender affirming care, especially, there's a lot of misinformation floating out there, not unlike when we saw the early COVID days. If we all inject bleach, obviously we'll be fine. And similarly, nobody is going through the kindergarten drive-through to get their sex change. So there's so much misinformation out there. When we talk about gender identity, it is not something that is visible in the same way that sexuality is not necessarily visible, right? So what we do, who we are on the inside, isn't always reflected on the outside. I imagine that for many of us in the room today, what you are wearing right now is not what you might wear on the weekend when you're mowing the lawn or, having brunch with friends, right? I call it my work drag. We all code switch in different ways. Gender identity is very similar because who we are on the inside, it is not always safe to express that on the outside in every environment. And so what we do is we look at hey, how do I dress? How do I present myself? How do I exist in a space that is safe for me, but also feels aligned with who I am? So our gender identity is who we are on the inside. We know it to our core, regardless of how other people read us. And then gender presentation is how do we choose to present that to the world so that the world reads us in a way that I am legible, in a way that aligns with who I am. Does that make sense? Where sexuality is just, this is who I'm into.
Thank you so much, Jasper. Eli, a little more level setting. Can you walk us through some of the most significant LGBTQ plus rights related federal actions?
Sure. I think it's important to start with the executive order that was issued on the first day of the Trump administration. And I'm going to read some of the language from these, which are pretty hateful, but I think it captures what's going on and also captures some of the animus that courts have picked up on in striking down the executive action. So first day in office, defending women from gender ideology extremism and restoring biological truth to the federal government. And included within this order were various definitions that then were picked up on in subsequent executive orders. So I'm going to go through those because I think they're a disheartening contrast to sort of Jasper's level setting in terms of terminology and understanding. So sex shall refer to an individual's immutable biological classification as either male or female. Sex is not a synonym for and does not include the concept of gender identity. Female means a person belonging at conception to the sex that produces the large reproductive cell, and male means a person belonging at conception to the sex that produces the small reproductive cell. Gender ideology replaces the biological category of sex with an ever-shifting concept of self-assessed gender identity, permitting the false claim that males can identify as and thus become women and vice versa, and requiring all institutions of society to regard this false claim as true. And gender identity reflects a fully internal and subjective sense of self, disconnected from biological reality and sex and existing on an infinite continuum that does not provide a meaningful basis for identification and cannot be recognized as a replacement for sex. So this is what sets the table for the executive action that follows. And within this executive order is a directive to all federal agencies to use these definitions and to use sex as opposed to gender in future action. So this is sort of the overarching framework. And then there's specific areas where this executive order and other direct executive orders focus on, and some of which Councilwoman Landau mentioned. So first, there are prisons. So there's an executive order actually within the same executive order that talks about housing people according to their sex as opposed to according to their gender or any other sort of way. Eliminating within prisons gender affirming healthcare. And for those executive actions, there have been lawsuits that were filed, and so far they've been successful as to the individuals who brought those actions. There's not a broad nationwide injunction in place. And we'll see this is sort of like a whack-a-mole type of situation, right? Where there's executive order as to this issue, as to that issue, as to that issue. And sometimes the courts directly grapple with it as to the broad nationwide situation. Sometimes the courts grapple with it as to the individuals. So it's important to sort of keep in mind the full map of everything that's going on. So that's one area. Another area is passports. Right, an executive order saying that passports need to have your sex as opposed to anything else. There's a lawsuit pending that's now taking that on. There's the military, transgender ban in the military. That's sort of been the area where litigation has been most successful so far. There's a nationwide injunction that's in place on that front right now. And that's an area that's close to my heart because we were involved in one of those lawsuits. Sports. Right? Executive order saying that, I guess it's called keeping men out of women's sports. Again, that's the language that the administration has chosen to use. So again, it is an executive order that's geared towards keeping transgender women from participating in sports, in women's sports. And there is litigation that's currently pending challenging that. And then there's litigation currently pending challenging withholding federal funding for gender affirming care. So these are, some of the areas, only some of the areas where there is current activity. I saw a tracker where there's like 200 plus lawsuits that are currently pending. So there's a lot going on, but I think this whack-a-mole analogy is probably the best one.
Thank you, Eli. And Rhonda, from where you sit, how would you characterize what we're seeing?
So we're seeing these pronouncements from the administration that aren't just unconstitutional, they aren't just scientifically inaccurate, but they're cruel, right? There's just so much cruelty, and that the words and the deeds are designed to chip away at our dignity. And when your dignity is taking a hit, it's really hard to fight back for your rights. It's really hard to demand what you're entitled to. And so I think that, this conversation should be about pushing back on that loss of dignity.
Jasper, I want to talk for a moment about youth, because in many ways, when we think about those who are most vulnerable, we think about the youth, and in particular, the youth that you serve at the Attic. From your work at the Attic, what would you say are the most pressing challenges that you're seeing among LGBTQ youth in Philadelphia?
Thank you. So one of the things that I think is a little bit unique to the LGBTQ plus community is that we aren't born into the movement in the same way that we are with, say, racial identity. When we hit, many of us of color, any of us of color have to cope and navigate the world of racism from birth, right? And when we are young and, babies and toddlers and even young children, right, we have adults ideally who are helping us grapple with that and protecting us. For the LGBTQ community, most of us, really any of us, don't come into that identity until we're a little older. And that could be as young as, 4, 5, 6. That could be as old as in your 20s, 30s, 50s, right? 40s too. And one of the things that's important to know is that when we come into that identity and we say, okay, this is the community that I am looking to be a part of being part of that community is understanding our history, right? So I was born into a Chinese American family here in the States. I didn't learn about the Chinese Exclusion Act until much later, but I understood how I was treated differently from the beginning. But it wasn't until I came out really in high school, back then as lesbian, that I understood that there was all of this history around my sexuality, around Stonewall, around Philadelphia specifically. And later, when I came out as trans, I was in my late 20s, and I realized there's a whole history there as well. And there are communities that I can be a part of. And so with our youth, what we're seeing is that, we see youth in their mid-teens to mid-20s or early 20s, and they are just coming into their identity. They're finding peers. They're finding supports. They're finding adults who can be mentors, who are part of the community, who can provide some of that history and context. And so while they're doing that, they're also being attacked by all of these executive orders and the news and all of this messaging that is filled with shame, right? I had a youth who, after the inauguration, woke up and said, am I illegal now, right? Is it illegal for me to be who I am? And the immediate panic of, will I continue to be able to see my therapist, my doctor, right? Gender affirming care is not just about puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones. It is also about, will I be able to go to a doctor that will understand that I might look this way, but I still need to get a pap smear, right? Or that I might still need to get certain medical things. And in an environment that won't stigmatize me for who I am, right? And so I think a lot of what we've been talking about with our youth is, this is what an executive order is. This is what a law is, right? We had our friends from the ACLU come in and do some trainings for our youth about that, right? Because they are just learning about those civics 101 that, I don't know about you all, I got to go to really fancy school as a kid and I still didn't learn about civics. So I am sure that many of our youth are not learning about civics in the way that they could. And so we're providing that information because we want them to become healthy, independent, civic-minded adults.
Rhonda, I'm hoping we can talk some more about healthcare. How just to take us back, how has the legal landscape around healthcare for LGBTQ plus individuals, particularly those with HIV and AIDS, evolved over the years?
So I arrived at the AIDS Law Project shortly after the ADA was enacted. I arrived as a child, of course. And we've had great success using the Americans with Disabilities Act. We've had great success using the Federal Rehabilitation Act. We've even had great success challenging discriminatory care under Section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act. So we have this kind of state where we're doing better for people who need care. We are helping people get the care they need. And as a result of helping people get the care they need, we now know that for people who are living with HIV, who can continue accessing their healthcare providers and their meds, HIV is not the death sentence it once was, right? It is now a chronic, manageable condition. We're seeing people with HIV living long, healthy, productive lives. And that's great. And so we're seeing this kind of shift that has been happening. My colleague, Yolanda French-Lawless, won Medicare coverage for a transgender client who needed gender-conforming surgery. Yolanda successfully argued that was medically necessary. She won. Great. We're like, wow, we have the path. We know where we're all headed. Even the federal government started collecting data on trans people in, 2018, 2019, because they were going to start to tailor programs, and we saw some funding. We saw all of that moving in the right direction. And we need to point out that everything that protects an individual's right to health care protects the public health, right? This whole notion of that, we can wall off health care for some people and that the people on the other side of the wall will be okay, that's a bit naive about how public health works.
So can you say some more about the data collection? Because having followed some of the executive orders in other spaces, is it fair to say that we're no longer moving in the direction of keeping good data in those spaces?
Yes, I would say we are no longer keeping good data where we need it to be kept. And so for places like the AIDS Law Project, I'm sure the Attic, we're going to continue to collect the data. In fact, we were collecting before the federal government asked us to. We're going to continue to collect the data. If our funders don't want that data right now, it's okay. It's not going to evaporate. There will come a time where we'll be able to use that. We will be able to demonstrate the needs that people have.
I want to add to that. I think what's frightening about the data collection on the federal level is that organizations like the NIH and CDC, right, we have an order to not collect data on certain research. So, for example, there was a HIV study that the CDC had initiated and funded that was specifically for trans folks in HIV prevention and what works. And that grant has been cut. And so if you don't collect the data, we suddenly don't exist on this national level, right? And then how many organizations have the support and resources of something like the CDC to do this research on a large enough scale that we then can justify our existence down the road?
Ronda, healthcare discrimination claims, have there been changes so far about how those are addressed, and what do you see going forward about how to pursue those claims?
So we used to rely, and used to is like pre-January, we used to rely a lot on the federal administrative agencies, the Department of Justice, the Office of Civil Rights. I mean, for a public interest law firm, you file with administrative agencies that care a lot about the issues. They pay for all of the discovery, which is great. Also, that's a place where we can bring cases that don't have a lot of damages. In our healthcare cases, people thankfully don't stick around and wait for a bad outcome if they have been denied healthcare. If they can go somewhere else, they would and they should. So what we have, are people like, you got denied healthcare, but you got the dental service you needed 3 weeks later. What's that cost? What's that worth? What are the damages on that? So the federal agencies were a great place to bring cases that were about the rule of law, about dignity, but not necessarily damages. Well, now, as we know, those federal agencies are really closed for business. We're not going there anymore. And so we're going to have to pivot to the state and local anti-discrimination agencies. And I think we need to support those agencies who were always a bit busy, but now I'm afraid that they will be flooded. And so they need, here's a pitch, they need more training, they need more resources, they need more staffing. If we're bringing all our claims to them now, we hope they're going to be up to that challenge.
Looking at what's coming out of HHS and other federal agencies, what changes do you anticipate for healthcare rights?
So we already know that LGBTQ adults have a higher risk of significant health disparities compared to their heterosexual or cisgender counterparts. And that's for reasons you could probably guess, right? Inferior health insurance, limited coverage, greater vulnerability to poverty, and, discrimination that we hear about all the time. Now let's add to that ugly mix possible cuts to Medicaid. And we might see imposition of work rules for Medicaid recipients, which didn't work the last time that was tried. We've seen, as Jasper mentioned, cuts to HIV research and prevention efforts. We've seen, as Eli mentioned, executive orders that try to erase a person, a stroke of a pen, okay, you don't exist anymore. We've seen this very ugly outcome-directed research. There was an NIH directive that wants to study, and this is like trigger warning. These are all such ugly words, but social transition and/or chemical and surgical mutilation among children who transition. They want to study regret as a way to saying you can't do that anymore. There's now a national tip line, and as I was saying to a colleague in the audience, it's either a whistleblower protection or a snitch line, depending on how you think about it, but that providers who offer gender-affirming care can be reported. I mean, that's a very scary idea. And in the end, what we know is that if people don't feel protected, if they don't have their dignity, if they don't feel like they have rights that they can assert, they're not going to get health care. And when people with HIV don't get health care, they don't get tested, they don't get treated, and HIV is going to come roaring back. And for those of us who were there for the first round, where we saw every week people we knew, our clients, our friends, our community members die of HIV, we simply can't return to that.
I think when we were preparing for this panel, you told us about a time in 1998, 1999, when you remarked to colleagues, no one died this week. And it was sort of a moment.
Yeah, I mean, those of you, Cynthia Schneider, who's back there, I mean, we remember these days. Our clients, if you didn't provide the service quickly enough, the client was gone, and not gone like moved, gone like dead. And we have to do everything we can not to return to that again.
Jasper, I'd like to ask you to answer the same question. What changes are you anticipating based on the healthcare shifts at the federal level?
Yeah, I think we're already starting to see the rumor mill ramp up in ways that, people are saying, oh, like so-and-so isn't doing gender affirming care anymore. Yes, they are, right? There are lots of places, especially in Philadelphia. I will say, just to clarify, in the city of Philadelphia, I don't know a single provider who has actually stopped providing gender affirming care, and that includes for minors. Now, that might be different in the world of surgery, but in terms of hormones, medical care, and therapy, I have not seen that. I think what we're seeing is we're going to see a lot of gender-based violence. We've already started seeing a rise of that, not just in terms of interpersonal violence, but also we're seeing a real, torrent of mental health concerns. Even since November 8th to be specific, we've seen these increases on the suicide crisis line to 988. The Trevor Project reported a 700% increase just between the election day and the end of 2024. And we are seeing that increase here at the Attic as well. We're seeing so many more youth reaching out, counselors, parents, everyone reaching out and saying, hey, I'm a parent of a 12-year-old trans or gender non-conforming kid. Why am I researching like suicide with signs and symptoms, right? Or like, why am I looking at this? Because my kid is 12 and was a happy kid until a few months ago, right? So we're seeing this very real impact, and we're seeing an increase in bullying. We're seeing a lot of folks who are advocates, say at a school or at a youth center or at other location, or even among family, who want to help and step in and protect that kid and are afraid that they are going to lose their job as a teacher or a research person or whatever if they stand up to this bullying. And so I think even without those policies being explicit, we're seeing the fear affect the care of young folks. And I think that, you know, everyone I know, whether they are minors or not, are trying to figure out, well, what is my healthcare going to look like? If anyone is on like some of the Facebook groups, right? There's Queer Exchange, which is always a little bit of a poop show, but frankly, but we see all the time folks who are saying, hey, I have this medical emergency. Which hospital is safe for me to go to as a trans or non-binary person, right? And then you have a whole flurry of comments. And I think for myself too, it's, you know, where am I going to get my hormones? Where can I get that in a way that is safe? I think we're going to see a lot of folks trying to figure out, like, what do we do? How do we take care of ourselves?
Right. And with the increase in bullying that you're talking about and the concomitant rollback in protections against discrimination and harassment on those bases, I just harken back to what Rue said, right? At the state level and at the local level, those civil rights protections being in existence actually may give some support to those educators or some support to people who do want to intervene and take steps to address. Eli, I'm hoping we can revisit the 5 subject matter areas that we talked about earlier. So we talked about prison, passports, sports, gender affirming care, the military. Where are we with those things?
I think where we are is that there's just so much, right? There's so much. We think of landmarks, U.S. Supreme Court cases, Brown versus Board of Education, other key civil rights cases, where there was, you know, one case that was the focus of the attention of everybody, right? And now we have, just in the area of transgender issues, we've got, you know, these 5 different areas that are all very, very significant. And unfortunately, the law and the sort of litigation is not well matched to dealing with things quickly. It's sort of the best tool that we have right now. It's the tool that's been sort of the most successful. Again, the litigation that has gone to court has in general been successful in one way or another. The problem is that with all of these areas, right, it takes forever to get to a decision on the merits, and a decision on the merits from the United States Supreme Court, which is where many of these cases are ultimately going. So what you end up with is, in some cases, you end up with a preliminary injunction, which sort of is good for the time being, but might only be tailored towards the particular individuals who are before the court, as opposed to everyone nationwide. So that might leave you in a situation where you got to file another case on behalf of another group of people, and then another group of people. We had a transgender military case where, on behalf of 2 Air Force members in New Jersey, and we didn't know whether we had to bring it or not, because we didn't know whether there was going to be a nationwide injunction from another transgender military case. We were fortunate in that there was a nationwide injunction, and our case ultimately became less important. But it depends on the area, it depends on the judge, and it just takes so long. And then what we're finding is there are sort of tricks that the administration plays to try to get around even the successful court action, right? When we saw in the deportation area, where there's this battle now about whether the administration is or is not complying with the court order, right? There is, in the gender affirming care area, right, there is the executive order that was withholding federal funding for medical institutions that were providing gender affirming care to minors. And there was an injunction, actually a nationwide injunction, issued against that. And then the administration sent out letters to providers saying, we intend in the future to withhold funding if gender affirming care is provided to minors, right? So it wasn't saying we're doing this now. This has been outlawed, but we're intending to do it in the future. And that, of course, creates a massive chilling effect. And the litigants went back to court, and the court said, no, that's not violating the court's order. That's something different. And there was another situation where the administration relied on a different provision within a different executive order in order to obtain the same result that was outlawed in one case. So it's if you go through military, there's a nationwide injunction. Gender affirming care, there's a nationwide injunction. Prisons, it seems to be litigant specific. On sports, it's an open issue. And then I think that covers, and on gender affirming care is sort of what we, on passports, it's an individual issue also. So there's no nationwide injunction in place. So there's just going to be more and more litigation. And the problem is that every day there's more executive action, right? Like yesterday, Penn received a letter saying that their funding's not going to be restored unless they send apology letters to all of the women athletes who did not achieve the records that they would have achieved had transgender swimmers not been participating, right? And that could be its own lawsuit, which would take its own weeks, months, years to go through. So it's really like, how do you do it? But unfortunately, it seems like the courts are the best avenue for challenging action right now. So that's why it's sort of frightening, but hopeful that at the end of the day, the right result will be reached. Frightening in that there's the need to deal with all of these cases, and frustrating in that the speed that is needed doesn't match the speed that the forum that's sort of best available can provide.
So Rhonda, how can attorneys in Philadelphia better serve the legal needs of LGBTQ plus clients in this evolving landscape?
So we're grateful to attorneys like Eli and our friends at the ACLU, who I think are here, for taking the cases that are in their lanes. But for public interest law firms like the AIDS Law Project, we're still fighting those discrimination cases every day. So lawyers who want to help us, get up to speed on the state human relation laws. Accept that cases without damages are still vitally important. Take cases that push back on stigma. We've got a lot. If you want to work with us, please contact us. I think we really have to, while the big battle, or I should say the different battle is being fought, every day we still have to help people get through to get the services they need. And on a kind of the human part of all of us, I think we need to check in on each other. People are really suffering. Our clients are freaked out and they need to hear the truth, right? So we're not going to say, oh, it doesn't mean anything, it's okay, but we have to find that sweet spot between being truthful, but reassuring our clients that we have their back.
Jasper, same question.
One of the things I think that is so important is that I think I could safely say that everyone in this room has some level of privilege in some area of your life, right? That might be financial, that might be your cisgender, that might be that you have family support or that you have secure housing. And one of the things that we can all do is leverage what we have for those who don't. So one of the things that we're seeing, especially in the trans community, is that in order for, say, to use the provider snitch website as an example, in order for me to go online and say spam it with the script from B Story, I would have to, it's not just like the passport comment section where I just put in my things and I can be anonymous. I have to put all of my contact information in there. And so one of the things that's really hard is that for me to advocate for our community, I also have to think about how am I going to keep myself safe? How am I going to keep my family safe? How am I going to keep my staff safe? And if you're in a position where you can be out and advocate for trans folks without, for me, I have to out myself as being trans in order to do that. Please do speak up, whether that's in a lunchroom conversation or in a legal case or online. Flood the comment section. We need allies, and we need allyship to be an action word.
What's giving each of you hope?
So I would say that we're having this conversation. I mean, look at all of you. It's wonderful. And I don't even know the numbers online, but I think you told me when this was offered many years earlier, the response was not as strong. I know you're all here to hear Jasper, but still. So I think that it's really great. There's so many people interested in talking about it. You know, we also take hope from that the vulnerable populations have been talking about. These are folks who have a history of protecting themselves because nobody else was coming, right? The cavalry wasn't coming to save people living with HIV back then. And so people protected themselves and they did a great job of saving themselves. So now it's time for all of us to be the cavalry and to protect our communities.
I think, I mean, maybe I'm a litigator, right? So I one area where I'm hopeful is, as much as there's downsides to it, the courts. There have been some really remarkable and at times beautifully written court opinions in the past 3 months, and generally action has been struck down. So I've got one of the transgender military ban cases was in the District of Columbia. And the judge was, really appropriately fired up and said that the executive order was soaked in animus, right? And she wrote at the beginning and clearly was recognizing the gravity of the moment. So just like to read this, because I think it captures what judges sort of can do, both in terms of righting wrongs and restoring dignity as well. The president has the power, indeed the obligation, to ensure military readiness. At times, however, leaders have used concern for military readiness to deny marginalized persons the privilege of serving. Fill in the blank is not capable and will hinder combat effectiveness. Fill in the blank will disrupt unit cohesion and so diminish military effectiveness. Allowing fill in the blank to serve will undermine training, make it impossible to recruit successfully, and disrupt military order. First minorities, then women in combat, then gays filled in that blank. Today, however, our military is stronger and our nation is safer for the millions of such blanks and other persons who serve. And then when the court went on to talk about transgender people being sort of the next fill in the blank. And just to see a court both recognize the need to strike down clearly unconstitutional action, but also do so in a way that is poetic and sort of recognizing that when you have executive orders that are sort of redefining who people are, there's a need to sort of match that both in terms of action and in terms of language as well. So to me, that was very, that's my source of hope.
So I want to say thank you to the panel. Really appreciate each of you and your perspectives, and hopefully if folks have questions for you individually, they can reach out. But join me in thanking our panel, please.
Hi, everyone. It's been so heartening to see how many people are interested in this. I know a lot of other panelists have brought this up, but like 200 plus people on a Tuesday morning for an LGBTQ focused event is amazing. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Crystal Kane, she, her. I'm the pro bono attorney at Blank Rome for my day job. And I also do a whole lot of other stuff, and this is going to sound like bragging, so I apologize in advance. I'm co-chair of the LGBT Rights Committee for the past 3 years with Maureen Holland. I am also a member of the Board of Governors, a trustee with the Bar Foundation, and co-chair of the Community Engagement Committee of the Philly LGBTQ Bar Association, which you're going to hear about a little more from Liz and Zach momentarily, and co-chair of the LGBTQ plus task force for the Association of Pro Bono Counsel. That's like a lot of titles to just say I care deeply about these issues. And it's kind of what I've built a lot of my life around. So I'm grateful to all of you. As I just said, I'm grateful to our panelists, who I'm going to briefly introduce in a moment, and then also ask them to more fully share their backgrounds. We keep saying like, oh, this is so important, all of these things are terrible. It's only been 3 months. To put this in perspective, I looked this up this morning just on the trans legislation tracker, just to see how things are going. As of 8:30 this morning, there were 859 anti-trans bills proposed in 2025. That is in the first 100 days of this administration. To give perspective, in 2022, like the full 12-month calendar year, there were only 174 of these, which is still 174 too many, but in eight times more in 3 months versus 1 year. And these are attacks on things like healthcare, books, gender markers on passports, the right to exist in public. So it feels hopeless in a lot of ways. So we get to talk about the fun part of this, right? Is how we can make things better. And when I'm calling it fun, it's sort of like the positive side of all of this awfulness is that there's this amazing community out there who's doing really cool stuff that we can support and be part of. So I'm going to call back to Councilmember Landau's remarks I wrote this down because it was so cool. Daily, sometimes small acts of resistance and solidarity. And I hope what you will all take from this panel is how you can get involved and do those as well. So I'm going to introduce in alphabetical order, Kay Greenberg. He is a staff attorney at the Center for HIV Law and Policy, as well as a past Philly defender and attorney at CLS. Kay, can you share more of your background?
In a galaxy far, far away from here. Okay. Hey, everyone. So, my background, I guess I was a Philly public defender. I ended up in the juvenile unit at the end. And then I did tenant defense at CLS and then decided to get into policy because I was tired of bashing my head up against the same wall over and over and over again. So should I talk about the org too?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, cool. Because you don't want to hear about me. So my org, I work for the Center for HIV Law and Policy. We are a national org. I actually brought our mission statement because it was wordsmithed and is better than any elevator speech I could do. So CHLP is an abolitionist legal and policy organization fighting to end stigma, discrimination, and violence towards communities that experience racial oppression, patriarchal violence, and/or economic divestment. We center our work in communities of people living with and deeply affected by HIV and other stigmatized health conditions, especially Black, brown, trans, and/or queer women, femmes, people who engage in sex work, use drugs, are disabled, living with stigmatized diseases, without housing, and are currently or formerly incarcerated. So what does that actually translate into? So one of our big initiatives is the Positive Justice Project, which works to decriminalize people living with HIV all around the country. They're currently active in 20 states in coalitions. So, I do work around both our aging work, so specifically people living and aging with HIV, focusing on two underserved populations, which are people aging with criminal records and also trans folks. And then a lot of my other work gets into data privacy and bodily autonomy and other things which are all impacted by this smorgasbord of executive orders and things coming out of the Fed. So I got a lot to share with you later.
Thanks, Kay. And next, I'm happy to introduce Bonnie Kaplan. She is one of the 3 Pennsylvania state leaders of Free Mom Hugs and also runs Free Mom Hugs Delaware County.
Good morning. I'd like to thank everybody for being here and for having this event. My name's Bonnie Kaplan. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm with the national nonprofit Free Mom Hugs. We're a nonprofit that was started by Sarah Cunningham, who was an Oklahoma mom, a Christian woman whose son came out as gay, and she rejected her child and then decided to educate herself and realized that she could be a person of faith and love her gay son. In 2015, Sarah went to the Oklahoma Pride Festival where she made a handmade button that said Free Mom Hugs, and she offered hugs to anyone who made eye contact. And the first young woman she hugged was someone who told her that she hadn't had a hug from her own mother in 4 years because she was a lesbian. And that's what lit the spark for Sarah. She continued to advocate for the community and made a Facebook post in 2019 that went viral. So we are now a national nonprofit in all 50 states and with chapters starting in other countries as well. And our mission is to empower the world to celebrate the LGBTQIA+ community. And we do that through visibility, education, and conversation. And really, we just want people to know that they're loved for who they are. Personally, I came to Free Mom Hugs as a mother of 3 children. And as a parent, I just can't understand any parent denying a child that love. And so I joined the organization with 3 children that I thought were straight. They've known from the time they were little that their father and I would love them unconditionally. And since my participation here, one of my 3 kids came out as queer through email. And it's funny, and yet it's shocking to me, because if my child, who knows that they are loved and supported unconditionally by both parents, both siblings, and extended family and community, to this day struggles with their identity, it is heartbreaking to me what it's like for children in families that don't have this kind of support. And so my participation in Free Mom Hugs was not because at the time it was relevant to me personally, but now I truly understand how important the work we do is. So thank you for including us this morning.
Thanks, Bonnie. And next, I am pleased to introduce Zach Strasburger. They are a senior attorney with the City of Philadelphia, as well as the co-chair of the Education Committee of the Philly LGBTQ+ Bar Association.
Thank you, Crystal. Thank you, Crystal. So I came to the LGBTQ movement as a youth activist back in the olden days of the late 90s, early 2000s. And then I grew up to become a lawyer to try to fight for justice. I started as a lawyer representing severely and persistently mentally ill youth in the foster care and juvenile justice systems. I then became a professor, ended up getting into appellate law and election law, and then eventually decided that I wanted to go back to the disability work that I had been doing. I now do Americans with Disabilities Act compliance work for the City of Philadelphia, where I try to make sure that we're not breaking the law too much at all, hopefully. And so what that's meant in the current moment is that the work I do is DEI. The work I do is protecting the rights of people with disabilities in our city. So personally, as a trans person who is also the parent of a trans kid, this is incredibly important to me, and professionally, it's what I do every day. So I'm really happy to be here to talk to you all about it. Thank you.
And last, but absolutely not least, I'm very happy to announce Liz Weissert. She is a senior associate here at Ballard, the current president of the Philly LGBTQ+ Bar Association, and a past chair for Equality Ballard.
Hi, Crystal. Thanks so much for this introduction. And it's so great to see so many people here at my daily place of work, here caring about the things that are really important to me. And so as Crystal said, I'm a senior associate in the litigation department here at Ballard's Bar. And I have been the president of the Philadelphia LGBTQ Bar Association for the last year and a half. And I hope to talk to you all today about all the different ways that you can get involved in supporting the LGBTQ community. There's a variety of different levels of involvement that you can have. And I mean, I think even just existing as a queer person in the current environment is an everyday act of resistance. And if you have the capacity and the ability to get involved in doing more, we want to talk to you about how to do that. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the history of our organization. The Philadelphia LGBTQ Bar Association has been around for almost 40 years now. When it was started, it was the Philadelphia Attorneys for Human Rights. because the people who wanted to start supporting the LGBTQ community were afraid of publicly identifying themselves as gay. And so it started out as a small organization of folks. Some people wouldn't even want to share their names or addresses because they didn't want people to find out that they were involved in the organization. But it has continued to grow over many years. And for many years, it was Gay and Lesbian Lawyers of Philadelphia. And we've since evolved into the Philadelphia LGBTQ Bar Association. But we've been here for many decades, and queer lawyers will continue to be here and to be fighting.
Thank you so much, Liz. I'm going to start with Zach, and I'm going to ask them to talk a little bit about the inclusive language guide. Councilmember Landau referred to Philly as a city of inclusion. I took like a ton of notes during her speech, so you're going to hear her quoted back a lot. But Zach, you were instrumental in developing this. So can you talk more about it, how it came to be, and how people can access it?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about the City of Philadelphia Law Department's Inclusive Language Guide. So if you're not familiar with the guide, it's something that some of us in the law department created to give people the language to be better, to do better. We started it because we were writing all of these appellate briefs, and some of the language that we saw in judicial decisions really felt disempowering to us. And we weren't sure how to talk about what we wanted to and how to make the arguments that we could. So we looked around to see what other lawyers were doing. How do you talk about the term grandfathered? It's everywhere in our code language. But we didn't want to be using language that came out of slavery. And so we wanted to find something else. So we compiled a lot of different resource guides that other professions are using. And we figured out what would work in the legal context. We took it to the law department's DEI committee. We took it to the City of Philadelphia's Office for People with Disabilities. We talked to a lot of people. And we created a guide that you can find by Googling Philadelphia Inclusive Language Guide. And you'll see, what do you do if you want to avoid the term grandfathered? You might say legacy exemption instead. The guide also gives people information on pronouns, gender neutral pronouns. How do you use them appropriately? When is it a good idea to use them? All the time. So there's a lot that we can't do right now as lawyers because whatever our job requirements may be, maybe you can only sign so many amicus briefs. Maybe you can't do much more than exist in your day-to-day. Maybe you're just exhausted. I will say that I am a part of a group of lawyers working on tracking what's going on with various DEI, anti-DEI efforts with the federal government. And at the beginning, we were so excited. We were like, yes, we're going to jump on this. I'm going to track this. You're going to track this. And we had energy. And now we are exhausted, and we are only 3 months in. It is really hard to keep going. But one thing that we can do is we can respect each other with the language that we use. We can do it in our legal writing, and we can do it in how we talk to each other. So City of Philadelphia is really happy to provide this guide for anyone. Please spread it widely so that we can respect each other and do what we can.
And I would just like to add that it's useful outside of legal writing. Like, it's very accessible, not just for lawyers. I use it all the time, which I guess I'm a lawyer, but like,
I wasn't going to say that,
you know,
but
my job is very uniquely non-associate partner track. So thank you for that, Zach. So next, I'm going to actually ask Kay to talk about one of the big cases that the Center for HIV Law and Policy is working on that has pretty broad impacts.
Just out of curiosity, I'm going to ask for a show of hands. Who in this room is familiar with the Kennedy versus Braidwood case? I've got one person. All right. 3 or 4. Okay. So y'all should be familiar with it because it's coming for all of your preventative health care. You like those colon screenings. Those might be going away. You like, and Basically, any preventative care. So essentially, oral arguments were just heard in front of the Supreme Court on the 21st. And then last Friday, the Supreme Court asked for additional briefs. There's a potential decision coming in late June, early July, based upon people who forecast that kind of stuff. So basically, what is Kennedy versus Braidwood? So it's a case out of the Western District of Texas, where all great ACA cases begin. So at that level, it was brought by Braidwood Management Corp and a couple of other plaintiffs as closely held Christian held corporations, claiming that they shouldn't have to pay for health insurance that covers preventative care because of 5 separate constitutional violations. The only one that is continued on its way to the Supreme Court is a violation of the Appointments Clause, and also claiming that they should not have to specifically cover PrEP, which is prophylactics. It's a regimen of medication that has 99% effective rate for preventing people from acquiring HIV, that they shouldn't have to cover it because having to pay for it, in their words, encouraged gay sex and use of drugs and sex outside of marriage, all of things that their religion did not support. In the Western District of Texas, Judge O'Connor, again, the source of many a great ACA ruling, ruled that on behalf of them for the RFRA claim, thankfully limiting it to the plaintiffs themselves, but did rule that there were violations to the Appointments Clause, specifically that the United States Preventative Task Force, which is a body of about 16 volunteer medical professionals who are appointed, who basically they make recommendations as to what preventative care is efficacious, giving things A, B, C, ... ratings. And under the ACA in 2010, the task force has been allowed for much longer. It became under the ACA that insurance has to cover all of this preventative care without associated costs. So there's no cost sharing. What does that actually mean? Well, for a medication like PrEP, we're not just talking the cost of the medication, which is high. We're also talking about all of the visits that you need to make and all of the additional testing that they need to do. So we're talking all of the associated costs with all this preventative care. There's a lot of really great resources if you want to learn a little bit more about the case, as I'm obviously giving you guys the down and dirty kind of quick version of it, so everyone else has time. But basically what the Supreme Court was hearing is whether or not the USPSTF whether they were properly appointed. The argument that is being made is that they are superior officers and therefore were needed to be properly confirmed by the Senate. And then the government is arguing that they are inferior officers. The question that the Supreme Court just asked for on Friday, which is slightly scary, is about whether or not the secretary has the ability to appoint them directly, because that would allow for a carve out for all preventative care between 2010 and 2023 to potentially go away. There's also an additional issue of what has changed in the last 3 months. Kennedy is now our Secretary of Health, and could potentially be given a lot of grace by the Supreme Court in terms of what level of control he thinks he has over this task force and their recommendations. So we at CHLP, we filed an amicus brief on the case, basically talking about the incredible negative impact that a decision in this case would have on the communities that we serve. We partnered with Jenner Block, currently the countersuing the government. And there's a lot of things that are going on about it. And I'm supposed to talk about what can you do to help. So obviously, it's interesting at the district court and at the Supreme Court level, 150 million people are at risk of losing access to preventative care. I mean, in all seriousness, this is going to lead to people dying. Do you know what was not mentioned at all in front of the Supreme Court and all in front of the Fifth Circuit? Those 150 million people, because the case is about the appointments clause and, constitutional law and, blah, 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 blah. So something that's important right now is making everyone aware that all of our healthcare is at risk, that 150 million people are at risk of losing healthcare, and it is going to disproportionately impact lower income folks. Because, for example, if they got rid of these recommendations, you're going to end up with insurance plans that cherry pick what they cover, and people who pay for lower insurance plans are not going to have that kind of preventative care. They've shown that something like a $10 increase in the cost of medications for copays, there are studies that showed like the fall off is dramatic. Under the law, quote unquote, the Supreme Court can't take things like that into account. All they can deal with is the blah, blah, blah. However, we all know that they watch the news, they pay attention to things that are going on. And the fact that in a room full of lawyers and professionals that care about this stuff, that 4 people knew about this case, or maybe 6 if I missed some people in the back, that's scary. So we got to getting the word out, making sure that people are aware that this is going on is important. In Pennsylvania specifically, there is also currently a bill that would protect our preventative care. It's not a perfect bill because it specifically has a carve out for Pennsylvania's RFRA, the Religious Freedom Statute, which arguably didn't need to be in there, at least in my humble opinion. But they didn't ask me before they, brought it forward. It passed the House. It's in committee in the Senate. So at least for Pennsylvanians, that would protect their health care. And it specifically makes reference to those A and B recommendations by the United States Preventative Health Task Force. And the other thing that everyone who's working on this case is talking about is, even if we, quote unquote, win the case, it's the battle, not the war. With Kennedy in charge, there's going to be a consistent attack upon people's healthcare, and there's going to be a consistent barrage of cutting down and narrowing things. So we're all kind of gearing up for the long haul. So that is the quickest I can do on a complicated Supreme Court case that has dominated my life for the last 2 years. If anyone has any questions, please ask me afterwards.
Thanks for that, Kay. So to sort of continue in the vein of what we can do to help, which, by the way, a lot of what you can do to help is donate to these organizations that presented here today. The Attic, Center for HIV Law and Policy, the Philly Bar, Free Mom Hugs, and the Philly LGBTQ Bar. I'm happy to just straight up shill. Oh, and of course, AIDS Law Project of Philadelphia. I can't believe I forgot to include you all as well. But we want to kind of circle back to what individuals can do, lawyers or non-lawyers. So I'm going to ask Liz to talk about the Philly LGBTQ Bar a little bit more.
Sure, I would definitely love to do that. And I meant to say when I introduced myself originally, as Crystal mentioned, I was the co-lead of Equality Ballard, which is our affinity group for LGBTQ lawyers and staff here at Ballard. And I would also just advocate for people to get involved, wherever you are, in your workplace. I think sometimes it can feel difficult when you see people who are doing so much to think that you can make a difference. but really any level of involvement is something that we welcome. So with the Philadelphia LGBTQ Bar Association, we have a few different committees and initiatives. One of ours is the mentoring program, where we pair LGBTQ law students with lawyers and legal professionals. And that's something I think is really important to show LGBTQ law students that they can be successful as lawyers, and to provide mentoring that they might not receive otherwise. We also have a community engagement committee where we connect our legal professionals in our organization with the LGBTQ organizations in our community. And we also have, Zach can talk about too, our education committee, where we put together educational programs and CLEs on issues that are facing the LGBTQ community. And we actually have a panel this upcoming Thursday, May 1st, right, at noon on trans issues, especially access to gender affirming care and what is the situation on the ground. So I encourage you we can provide you information about that. And it's really, we encourage you to get involved however you can. I think for me, this organization has been a way for me to connect with the LGBTQ community and see that there are other people like me, and kind of come together to figure out the best ways to address the problems that we're facing and to build strength together.
Thank you, Liz. And I was actually about to tap Zach to ask them to talk about the CLE on Thursday, which I know there's the Law Day rally, non-protest rally at noon. But for those of you who can't be there in person, I strongly encourage attendance at Zach's program, which I'm going to ask them to talk about a little more.
Sure, thank you. So in addition to what Liz and Crystal shared, you should know that I am moderating this panel on Thursday. So come hang out with me some more. It is free, although we welcome donations, and we will have an ACLU attorney and 2 healthcare providers talking about what has happened with access to care since January. What's happening with insurance? How are youth able to access care now? You've heard a little bit about that today, but we're going to talk more about that on Thursday, and we really want you to be a part of it. So please sign up. If you don't have the link already, Crystal's going to send it out after this panel, or you could find me or Liz afterwards. And we'd also welcome any more involvement with the LGBTQ bar. It's a really fantastic group. I just want to encourage people to be involved in whatever ways that they can. No, it will not be recorded due to the requests of the presenters. But thank you for that question.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Zach. So I also want to sort of highlight, in case anyone's confused, the Philly LGBTQ plus bar and the LGBT Rights Committee are separate. The LGBT Rights Committee is the LGBT Rights Committee of the Philly bar. So we kind of meet and advocate for LGBTQ inclusion and causes within the bar association, which is lovely. And the Philly LGBTQ bar is an independent organization. Most of us are members of both because we do different things, but I just wanted to highlight that for anyone who might be confused. So, and now I want to ask Bonnie to talk about kind of what she does, how we can get huggers at events, and also to share what those little pom-poms are on front of her.
I'm so excited for this part because you really scared me with the last part. Obviously, what we're discussing today is really important, and I can't thank everybody here who does the really hard work for what you're doing and for continuing to be there for the LGBTQ plus community. Free Mom Hugs was started by a mom, but we actually welcome all allies. So no kids, no problem. Join us. Not a hugger, no problem. One of the things I really love about what we do is there is something for everyone. And in Pennsylvania, there are so many opportunities. I can proudly boast that Pennsylvania has almost 6% of the Free Mom Hugs volunteers in the country. And last year, we were responsible for 13% of events nationwide with free mom hugs. We are way out there with what we're doing. And the only way we are able to do what we do is with the help of volunteers. If you're not into volunteering and you want to give money, we welcome donations. And people might wonder, well, hugs are free. Why do you need donations? We don't need donations, but we do attend lots of events that have fees, and many places will waive those fees. Some do not. So money goes there. We also have free giveaways like the stickers on the counter you're welcome to. But I really want to talk about the important things that we do. The most important thing we do is just show up and be visible. We want people to know that we see them, we celebrate them, and we love them. And it's also important, I'm a cisgender, hetero, slightly older than middle-aged mom in the suburbs. I want other people like me to see that this is how we're meant to be as people, to connect with other people in the community, to see that we should be giving love to the stranger. And that's very important. And that's something that anybody can do. So we go to events. They don't have to be Pride events, although we do a lot of Pride events. Crystal and I were talking beforehand about the variety of places that she's seen us. I mean, we've gone to goth book fairs. We go to theater programs. We go to churches to talk about what we do. If we are invited, we try to be there because we are happy to talk to anybody about unconditional love and acceptance, which is what we're all about. The primary thing we do, like I said, is offer hugs. We always ask for consent. We have a big Facebook presence because that's the easiest way for us to connect right now, although we're trying to find alternatives to that. But I wanted to share something that was a comment we received on one of the posts in an LGBTQ plus Pennsylvania group a couple of years ago. This person wrote, at Chester County Pride Fest 2022, I got a hug from one of these lovely moms, referring to a free mom hugger like myself. I was not the person here. And it was such a great hug that I nearly started crying. I honestly still think about that hug all the time, like 8 months later. I will probably never forget that hug. It seems silly that a hug has such a big impact on me, but whoever you are, if you're in this group, thank you. I needed that hug more than I even realized at the time. And just knowing that a stranger would give me such a heartfelt hug still picks me up on days when I'm feeling down. Whoever started Free Mom Hugs is a saint. Thanks to everyone who does this. We make an impact. Even if you only connect with one person, you are making a difference. I mentioned that besides donating money and giving hugs, there are other ways to get involved. I'm an area leader for Delaware County. We have a Happy Mail program. We collect names and addresses at Pride festivals. And then throughout the year, we send cards letting people know that we're thinking of them, that their presence in this world matters. So if you don't want to contact people, you don't want to leave your house, but you want to do something, you can send Happy Mail. You like doing other things at home, we have craft activities that you can do at home that we then take your products and share them for free at events that we attend. Something that we've become known for are our portable hugs. They look like this. We make these pom-poms, nice and squeezable. Today I brought the rainbow pom-pom and the trans pom-pom, but we do other types of pom-poms. Our volunteers make these, and I always tell people that take them, they're filled with love. So we attach a tag that lets people know you are so loved, and it has our contact information on the back if anybody wants to find us. I used to wonder, do these really matter? It makes us feel good, and we know people take them because they disappear every year, but do they matter? And I was at a Pride parade in media 2 years ago, and someone came up to me, someone I didn't know, and they had one of these tied to their pocketbook zipper. And they said, I got this from your organization last year at Pride. And they carried it with them every day as a reminder. So we know that what we do matters. We know that the more volunteers we have, the more love we're able to spread. And let me tell you, for as much as we give, we get so much more back in return. I can't emphasize that enough. So we've got lots of events coming up. If you'd like to get more information about the national organization, it's www.freemomhugs.org. You can check out Free Mom Hugs Pennsylvania on Facebook, and I would love to talk to any of you after today's panel.
Thanks so much, Bonnie. So we're running sort of over time, so I want to thank everyone for coming, but I also want to call up Vic Patel to actually close us out and share information about the next Meeting the Moment.
Well, thank you all. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Vic Patel. I have the honor of serving as the chair of the Board of Governors this year. It has been an interesting year to do that. But I'll start with some thank yous. First, thank you to Rue Landau. Thank you to Marcel Pratt and Ballard Spar for hosting us. Thank you to our panelists and our moderators. This has been an amazing event. Thank you all for being here and all the work that you're doing. Thank you to the organizers for this event. Thank you to the staff. This is so much work to put this together, and the staff does so much. So thank you to the Bar Association staff for doing this. Thank you to our leadership. Thank you to Kathy. I think I saw Ezra here, Christine, Jen, Harvey, and Hillary. But most of all, thank you to all of you for being here. When marginalized communities are attacked over and over and over again, we need to stand up and speak out. We need to be there in allyship. And one of the ways that we can do that, this was brought up at the beginning, but I want to emphasize it again. We have forms over here to sign up to volunteer, take a pro bono case. And if you're not in the room, if you're online, we're going to be sending around forms, a sign up form for you to, once again, volunteer, take a pro bono case. As a legal services attorney, I know about the strains that are put on the resources that are already there. Anything that you can do to take a pro bono case helps all the people that we as legal services attorneys cannot do. Now, the issues that we face, right, are myriad. So we're going to continue to have these events. Our next event is going to be on May 28th. It's going to be a focus on the impacts to education and disability rights. Keep an eye on your email for more information about that. But once again, thank you all for being here, and I hope to see you all next month. Thank you.